Welcome to the first Writers Speak event of the spring. My name is Duncan White, and I convene the Writers Speak series for the Mahindra Humanities Centre here at Harvard. And today it's my great pleasure to introduce Patricia Lockwood, who will be in conversation with Tara Menon. Patricia Lockwood is, of course, a poet, essayist, and novelist of great distinction, but I, like many others, were first introduced to her brilliance through her tweets, which played with and often invented the argot of the extremely online, injecting it with absurdity and strangeness in ways that were relentlessly funny. That humour runs like a current through her first two collections of poems, Balloon Pop Outlaw Black, published in 2012, and Motherland, Fatherland, Homeland Sexuals, published in 2014, where it is married to a remarkable commitment to defamiliarization, the ability to use the surprise of metaphor to make us see the world afresh. And those gifts are offered through her prose too, whether in Priestdaddy, her 2017 family memoir, which won the Thurber Prize for American Humour, or in her first novel, No One Is Talking About This, published in 2021, which won the Dylan Thomas Prize and was shortlisted for the Booker. Rather unfairly, Patricia is also a superb essayist and literary critic, writing most frequently for the London Review of Books, where she is a contributing editor. Excitingly, her new novel, titled Will There Ever Be Another You?, is forthcoming in September of this year. In conversation with Patricia is the scholar, literary critic, and novelist Tara Menon. An assistant professor in the English department here at Harvard, Tara is the author of Speaking Parts, Character, Conversation, and Social Worlds in 19th Century British Novels. My voice went away with Speaking Parts, which is forthcoming with Princeton University Press. And her debut novel, Underwater, will be published by Riverhead in the US in February of next year. The rights to that book have been sold in 28 other territories. Her essays and reviews have appeared in publications including the New York Times Book Review, The Nation, Los Angeles Review of Books, Book Forum, and the Paris Review. Okay, please take a moment to silence or switch off your cell phones. There will be an opportunity to ask questions later in the session. And when it comes to that point, please raise your hand so we can wait for the microphone to circulate around the room. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Patricia and Tara.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Trisha, for being here. We are all in for a real treat because later Trisha will read from this brand new novel. We're going to do that sort of at the end instead of at the beginning. And then I have a plan, which is we're going to get through the tremendous stack of books and go memoir, novel, and then we're going to go to the criticism. But the plan might just go completely awry, and we'll
Tara just wants to talk about the criticism.
I
so
do
I
only want to talk about the Updike.
That's fine.
The whole time. Yeah. But I want to start because you wrote a piece about getting COVID.
I did.
And the first line of the piece was, "My story will be that John Harvard gave it to me." And so for that, I feel all of us in this room collectively apologize. But could you tell us a little bit about that piece and that time?
So it was really wonderful, actually, because I did a podcast with Chris up there earlier, and I didn't know that we would be recording it in that very room.
It was the Thompson Room.
It was the Thompson Room. So if you're familiar, it's kind of an imposing place to exist in. But I was very excited because I was like, I described this carpet. I described, the Times winged chariot, like the Kronos statue. And I definitely described the big fat bust of John Harvard, which, as I do say in the beginning, I was like, I did not know that was a guy. I was like, I guess it makes sense that John Harvard was a man, but I just never thought about it that way. So I was like very excited to be back in it, and I felt like maybe we're gonna cure ourselves and the world by me returning to the Thompson Room in that fashion. So yes, a couple days after I returned, I was like, I'm insane. Or I believe I looked at my husband and I was like, is this what being alive is like? And he was like, no, it isn't. And then we understood that something was wrong. Maybe because it was like early wave, we experienced much more of the cognitive effects. He was like crawling around in the ground, coughing his lungs out. Very, very bad. He was also playing, what is the game? Thank you for that.
Wow.
My precious readers. Yes. So I am in bed being paranoid because I've decided that his COVID is fake. I was like texting my friends. I was like, he's got man COVID and he's faking his cough. It was like so rude, right? But in reality, he's in the other room creating endless cat-human hybrid characters in Skyrim and only playing the introduction. He never got into the game. And he was just like lounging, creating his cats, playing the game, and he had like no memory of it later. So that's what it was like for us. So if you're at all concerned about this being like an illness narrative in that sense, no, I never really say what anyone's temperature is, but I am telling you about the human-cat hybrid aspect of it, yeah.
One of the things that struck me as a sort of, I don't know, strange or perverse or something was that you wrote about COVID in this diary. There's some COVID in there.
Oh yeah, except I only use the word one time. So again,
You
don't
call it
worry
the new
about
illness.
Yeah,
the new
that's
illness.
fine.
But in fact, sort of illness and health and sickness are a theme throughout all of the books, right? That in fact the inciting incident of Priestdaddy, the reason that you move home with your parents is because your husband had to have a surgery. That no one is talking about it is about sort of like the health of a baby and the health of the mother of the baby, and in so many ways, it's so personal. Like health is so sort of bodily and personal and intimate, but in all of those cases, it's really political. That it's the cost of healthcare is the reason that you have to move home. Abortion rights and reproductive rights, and then even here, it's kind of about conspiracy theories and disinformation. And so I guess I was wondering about how you think about that. I don't know, maybe seeming contradiction about writing about something that's so personal, like the most personal thing, but it always being sort of political at the same time.
I think that's how it does end up being political, not to be cliche or to utter cliches or anything like that. I don't directly approach my work politically. If I tried to do that, it would be impossible. I don't have insights in that way, but I can remember very telling details, things that stand out starkly, things that the doctor says to you in a certain moment. And if I get it in that way, I think it operates politically or it functions politically, even if I myself am not really of a political turn of mind. Or if I set out to write some great political thing, I'm not going to do it. But if I'm like, why is everyone talking weirdly over here? Let's look at that. There will be something there. And you're very astute to say that it's woven throughout. I mean, it's the very beginning of things. And it's, in fact, the end of this, too. Like, my husband has another freak catastrophe. And that sort of takes up the latter half of the book as well.
Which you also write about in your amazing piece about meeting the Pope.
Meeting the Pope, who lived! He lived! When it seemed like he wasn't going to pull through, I was like asked to be on the BBC, and I'm like, I'm not going to come on the BBC and be like, R.I.P. the Pope. That's like so unlucky or just like bad to do. Yeah. So I said no, and I believe that is why in the end.
And I feel like you called the Pope in that piece a bowel guy.
Yeah, he was a bowel guy. So he had some of the same surgeries. He did, yeah. And he was in the hospital for the same thing. So at the moment that I go up to meet the Pope, my husband is still very sick. So he had had the surgery the previous year, but he basically like couldn't eat any food in any sort of normal way, right? So I'm like, what do I do? Do I believe in God again? Like, is the end of my life near? I'm going to meet the Pope. If I approach him as a cradle Catholic, what do I do? Do I offer some like, request, some supplication to him? What I did was I went up to the Pope and this was in the Sistine Chapel and the lighting was very bad. And the pictures taken by the official like Vatican photography team, I looked like McLovin. You can look at why this is true, but it is 100% true. So I approached the Pope looking like McLovin. And with tragedy in my heart because my husband is so ill, right? And knowing that the Pope has just gotten out of the hospital for something very similar. And I do this. I shake his hand and I go like this. And the Pope is confused and he like furrows his papal brow. And then he thinks that he understands. And he blesses my stomach because he thinks that I'm pregnant. 100% at that moment in time, the Pope was like, oh, I see what's happening here. She is pregnant. No, that is not what's going on. But I'm like, maybe the blessing can go backward. Because you do, like, you're sort of superstitious about these things. I had rosaries in my pocket. I was, like, jangling. I had, like, turned into a child again. And I'm going up to meet the Pope. and he blesses me thinking I'm pregnant.
Right.
And I'm like, it's going to ricochet back into my husband and cure him. So this was my experience with meeting the Pope.
Okay. So there's so many things I can say now. But I think what I would like to say is that story and that piece, I think, do something that you do, I think, sort of exceptionally in Priestdaddy, which is that it's so funny, and it's so it's so funny and it's so irreverent, but it's also so tender and beautiful and about suffering. And it's like about that kind of contradiction. But I want to move to Priestdaddy now, but before we do, for anyone who's unfamiliar, will you talk about the unique circumstances of having a Catholic priest as a father, like a real father?
Yeah, so for a real father, well, so we were trying to adapt this show for TV for a while, which if you've read it, very, very funny, right? We're all just like stuck in this room with a guy wearing resplendent robes, right? Like there's not a lot of action. But we were trying to figure out a way to basically explain this situation, right? Where it's like, how does this guy who starts out an atheist, joins the submarine services, breaks his back on a submarine, gets converted watching The Exorcist because he got too scared. So they didn't just watch it one time. They watched it like dozens of times on that rotation. I think you're gonna convert no matter what. So
on a submarine.
On a submarine.
Right.
So yes, I cannot imagine. I should try to imagine this moment more than I have, because like that must have been a very real thing for him, right? That's like,
I mean, it's terrifying.
You're so alone.
Yeah.
Like you're just fathoms deep. So I failed. I should have imagined that more than I did. But basically then you get home and you're like, all right, I'm gonna become a Lutheran, because that's the most extreme thing that a guy raised like Methodist or whatever can imagine. And then, he just inches along and he inches along. And sometimes with my father, if you say something to him earlier on, he'll later adopt it and think that it's his own idea. So I think that it's my mom's Catholicism that's why he really did move that way. And it was also the most extreme, the most impossible thing that you could do. But yeah, I mean, he was a very explosive father. He was not very present. Obviously, he had many shortcomings, as we all do. But you did get to see him in a pastoral role. And I do wonder sometimes if the tenderness in my writing that you speak of that is not present in my personality or in myself as an existing being in the world that is somehow present in my writing is from that. I don't know, but I'm way nastier than my writing is. Like, it's true. It's just much worse.
So So this is the memoir. It's really, if you haven't read it, it's an extraordinary, extraordinary book. And I'm going to ask forgiveness, but the professor of Victorian literature has to like come out just like at least one time.
Bust out, please.
So the characterization in the book is like really extraordinary of your parents in particular. But one of the things I noticed reading it this time through is that it's all external. That we don't get interiority, we don't get free and direct discourse about these people. They're sort of presented externally, but they are so memorable and they're so vivid. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I know your father, with wearing his underwear, with his gun, playing a guitar, and I want to read a quotation.
Oh yes, please.
Not from the book, but of the literary critic Terry Eagleton writing about Charles Dickens. Because this is how I think characters work, but please tell me if you don't think so.
Ride your hobby horse, Victorian professor.
Okay, so Eagleton says about Dickens, character in literature, so we are informed, should be complex, rich, developing, and many-sided, whereas Dickens's bunch of grotesques, perverts, amiable idiots, and moral monstrosities are none of these things. But this is because they are realist, not because they are defectively drawn. They are true to a new kind of social experience. Dickens's grotesque realism is a stylistic distortion in the service of truth, a kind of astigmatism which allows us to see more accurately. and I feel like your parents kind of function, and I'm not calling your parents moral monstrosities.
Grotesque syndrome.
Right. I would like to
No, but
clarify.
this is perceptive because I think where character is present in Dickens too is in the dialogue and how people sound, and so I feel like if I can reproduce the speech patterns of my parents, if I can write down those odd turns of phrase, you have them. You have them there. You don't necessarily need their interiority because I don't have that. I don't understand why they do anything that they do. They're completely opaque to me, but I know how they sound and I know how they interact with each other, and I know to a certain extent how they interact with me. So I think that character is there. I think you can find character apart from these things. Like I don't have a lot of theory of the novel, and I write criticism. But if you ask me like POVs and things, I'm not putting that stuff in because I don't know what it is. Okay, but I also think that you can write sort of instinctively.
Yeah.
In this direction, and if you hear people and experience them that way and think like, people are so weird, it's a little bit different now because we sound a little bit more the same, partly because of the internet, partly for other reasons. But if you just get any random 65-year-old guy off the street, he's gonna sound strange. He's gonna sound like himself, and like that's where character is. Like character is there.
Yeah. I'm trying to flip through this because I think speech is so right. There's a phrase that your mother keeps saying in this book. Do you remember what it is? Where she says it in the way that only she says it.
Oh gosh, what is it?
But,
in her, oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah! My mother screamed.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
In her oh yeah voice.
Right. And it's like catchphrase, right? It's like this memorable catchphrase, and you feel
But this is interesting that you bring this up because that's the only part probably in The Changeling that my mother actually sounds like my mother as herself, and you recognize that because you had read Priestdaddy, but also because you're an excellent reader. In the rest of it, she's very estranged from these people, from her parents, and you don't have access then to that sense of them as warm human beings. Right. If you can't hear them, they're not there for you.
Which you really, I think, do. I mean, it's. I think the remarkable achievement of Priestdaddy is the fact that it's so funny. You're really making fun, and you're making fun of that, right? It's not just it's funny. It's that like you are really making fun of them, and you're kind of like they're lampooned in a way, but the two kind of achievements for me are that on the one hand, there are these moments of real kind of like pathos and tenderness. And the one that really got me was that, so you make fun of your dad with his like, what's Arby's cheddar and beef and cheddar and like the gun and everything.
As many as it can buy, right? Like
it can buy for $20.
For $20.
Yeah.
As many as that can buy.
And then there's this moment really late in the book, and you say, what calls a person to a life-and-death job, a middle-of-the-night job, an edge-of-the-cliff job? My father lounged horizontal at home and sent us up and down the stairs to fetch for him, right? Like, this is in keeping with the characterization we have.
Yeah.
And then you say, but when the call came at 3 a.m, he was up and out of the door without the smallest sigh or protest, to serve the unthinkable, to read the ritual words to it, to plump the pillow under its head.
Yeah, and glad to know what to do with his life. I think a lot of us have this formless feeling like, what do we do with our lives? It is why people join the military at times. It's probably why people join various other like armed forces situations, like to be told what to do, because it is so vast. A life is so big stretching before you, you don't know what to do. I can give you a picture. I returned home recently, and I got COVID again. I got the Mahomes variant, right? It was like Super Bowl time. So I got that from like a Bills fan in the hotel. But I returned, and I entered the old rectory, the domicile, and immediately my dad's dog started like shitting and puking and pissing at my feet, and it was kind of like spinning around and like doing this crazy thing, and I was like, this was what it was like to be in this house. It's the thing that we could never get into the scripts. You could never put it on TV. My father comes into the room, and I'm cleaning it up, and he's like pointing out spots that I missed, like, and I'm just sitting here like looking up at him, and I'm like, this is what it was like. With the greater sort of, background that my father had recently during a hunting trip accidentally made himself deaf. So this, like, yeah, this is serious.
Permanent.
Well, I'll tell you. Okay. So he always has, you know, designed himself, like, fashioned himself a hunter, which no one in my family can hunt properly. They shoot, like, weird deer with, like, you know, one of their legs is all wrong or something. They can never do, like, what the big hunters do. So my father is out there in the snow. I'm picturing him in the snow. And he doesn't like to wear the big headphones because, like, sensory problems, so he just had these little earplugs in. And, you know, he turns and he sees the buck in the snow. And his earplugs fall out. And he takes the shot anyway. And it was, here's a nice detail, it was probably, it was like the gun that kid used to try to assassinate. Oh. Yeah, it was. It literally was that gun. So that, my father, in the next ensuing months, was like, I can't hear as well. What's going on? It was the upper register. He could no longer hear women speaking. So very, very nice for him. But he also couldn't hear confessions anymore.
Oh.
Right. So he had ordered all of these, like, little, you know, like, earbuds off the internet and stuff. And my husband, who can always cut to the heart of a problem, says, your health insurance will get you hearing aids. And he was like, oh, I didn't think they would. So now he has hearing aids.
Oh, good.
But yes, this is the end of this tale. This is an anecdote in the life of the Priestdaddy. In my life, as I lived it, this is what it was like. It's like a dog shitting and pissing in a dervish, and a guy's going deaf in the snow, and it's like, oh, it's like the gun that they were using to assassinate Trump. It's like everything was present at that time in microcosmos. And it was like, how do I carry this to people? How do I do this at all? Like, how do I communicate this sort of situation? But I also think that everyone experiences their own family this way. I'm just, not to that extent, maybe, but I think they do. Not maybe, yeah, but you know, not some of it. And then later too, like, again, the deer was very weird. He was like, the guy who processed it said, I don't even know what was going on with this deer. So is it worth it? Like, was that worth it? Right? So it's enormous pathos, as you say.
Yeah.
And the tenderness is drawn out of you, even if you know it's a totally fucked up situation, or that someone has, like, heinous beliefs and ideas, right? It's still drawn out of you, and that's yours, because you're a human being. So when that book won the Thurber, too, Priestdaddy, I, like, got up, and I will say, it was like a humor award, and I got up there, and I was like, a poisonous bitch, too. Because I was like, you couldn't write this book now, you couldn't be so affectionate about a family that diverged so greatly from your philosophies and your beliefs. So it's, to me, it's this, like, island of a time that we no longer have. And I, like, yelled at them. I don't even know. I was a little drunk. I was slightly drunk at that.
So may I suggest that, in fact, that emotion that you're describing, which sounds to me like anger, is really present in the book.
Yeah.
And there's a part, I actually, like, teared up when I was reading it this afternoon, where you say, let's hope I don't do it again. And do you want to read it instead of me?
Oh, give it to me.
Okay. These two?
These two.
Yeah.
A truce, then, between me and my father's house. I was not made in his likeness, but I have chosen something of his same extremity, his willingness to be available for the questions that knock on the door in the middle of the night. His voice inside the verses was so sweeping, his judgment from the pulpit so black and white, that it was hard not to inherit them. It was hard not to inherit the desire to stand over the deceased and say something, and it was impossible finally not to inherit his anger. As long as I lived under his roof, I had told myself that I had no temper, that I would never speak that knot of heat I felt so often in my throat, forced down into my ribcage and sent flowing into my fingertips. But I belong to myself now, and I can admit it. When I sit down at the desk, the anger radiates out of me in great bronze spikes, like holiness in the old paintings, and a sermon rises up in me, as if it has been waiting for breath, and puts it together bone to bone. I'm not interested in heaven unless my anger gets to go there too. I'm not interested in a happy eternity unless I get to spend an eternity on anger first. Let me speak for the meek and say that we don't want the earth if that's where all the bodies are buried.
Thank you. It's so beautiful. But so I think that another thing that feels so remarkable it feels like a furious book to me. But so much of the time, anger in writing is bitter or caustic or mean.
Yeah.
And like the anger of the book is like radiant.
Yeah,
like
I know.
it's
I don't know
reverent.
what
It's like
it is.
religious. Almost.
I don't know what,
really-
maybe because I just didn't know, I never knew where I felt anger. It was almost as if it were external, as if the world were experiencing instead of me, right? So like raying out of me in gray bronze spikes, it was something like that. If you're a person who feels things later, or who doesn't process things immediately, who like can't even be in normal conflicts, you know? I don't know, I just described it to like a feeling that the world was having, and I was sort of entering into it at that time.
I will say that is a really unusual passage from that book, and most of
It
the book
is.
is not like that.
Yeah,
At
most of
all.
it's
So
not
that's
like
like
that.
very false advertising for
It is a
how
little.
hilarious.
Although if
that
the
book
whole
is.
book were like that, that would be intense. Like, I'd be really insane. I'd be like, ah, listen to me.
a really difficult one. Okay, so kind of on track. I think let's move to
yeah.
the novel.
You are swerving. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the novel, I'll just like pull each book out, which
Yeah,
is this
whip it.
one.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that everyone who talks to you about this novel feels like kind of compelled to describe where they fall on the spectrum of extremely online
interesting, okay.
to not online at all. Right. So I would describe myself as being moderately online.
Moderately. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I'm
live a
like-
YouTube life.
That's a secret from my students.
That's a secret. She lives a
I
YouTube
will
life,
say.
and it thinks you're an 18-year-old boy.
And it's okay, that's really a secret.
Delete it.
No,
from the
in
podcast.
fact, some of my students who are in the room know that I go through like really, I put myself like through this kind of acrobatics to make sure they never see my YouTube algorithm. I'm like incognito mode, like try and sign in through someone else because like that idea is so
Why
horrifying
does
to
it
me.
feel so private?
Oh my God, we can talk about that later. Okay. But so the novel is described sometimes as an internet novel, as a
Yeah.
social media novel.
Yeah.
And so I guess the like very basic question I want to start with is that those two things are sometimes often thought of as being oppositional to each other.
Yes.
That you can't actually really read a novel if you're really online. That
Right.
you, and that feels not true to me about this book. That there's a kind of relationship between the internet and the novel that isn't oppositional
Yeah.
in the way. So could you talk a little bit about
Yeah, I mean,
that?
it did feel, at least for a time, like what we were doing on there was literary. You know, like the voice of it that we were batting back and forth together, it was literary. I think there was a little bit of a complication with the book where some people would assume that it was written in the internet language, which it wasn't. It was written in the more traditional, literary style. But honestly, people malfunctioned. Like they didn't know what to do. There was still this idea that like the internet couldn't be in a book, and that really fascinated me. I mean, it continues to happen. There was recently like another wave of, whenever there's a wave of internet novels, it's like 2. You know?
Yeah.
So we were like freaking out about ultimately like it was like 6 novels
Yeah.
or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And as I pointed out, I think I was talking about this on Blue Sky, I was like, also everything that would soon be directing the course of future world events was happening there. It was like happening behind the scenes. It was these machinations. So I don't understand still why it was considered to be a frivolous topic or something. And you know what it is? I know why. Because it is private, because people feel embarrassed. Like it's your YouTube life, right? So if you admit to that being like part of the fabric of reality, you have to admit that about yourself. So I think it's just that. It felt too intimate for people. And so it led to this sort of like reactionary, it wasn't even a backlash because people were very kind about my book, but it still was, you know, it would be like, well, this is a good one because it was written in like the more literary style. And I don't think that's how it works. I mean, I think we're like archivists. Right, I think it's still documentation. I think it's still like anthropology, archaeology. Even like I'm still paying attention to the way people talk on there, even though it's less and less usable now.
Yeah. So I think if you were any other writer, I wouldn't ask you this, but I was listening, in preparation for this, I was listening to the LRB, you know, you did your book tour in COVID, like during the pandemic.
that was not fun,
And in your LRB sort of interview, you say, because it's in 2021, you say, the only reason this novel is like tolerable, like the only reason it is readable at all is that Trump's not in power anymore. And
Hey. We were also talking about the fact that there was some salty like commentary in some of the criticism or essays that I like called him the dictator, and I was like, guys, vindicated. Like, it was just one of those things. You're not like happy to be like, yeah, you're right about the extremity or the severity of something. But yeah, looking down the barrel of another book tour where it's like, where you're talking about Donald Trump or being asked Donald Trump questions, it's very, I mean, we'll get through it together. But yeah, like, have patience with us and feel gentleness in your heart, because it's not fun. I mean, I grew up already in the mind of a narcissist, you know, and in 2016 I did my level best to be so tuned into everything, and this time I'm like, can I do it that way again? And probably a lot of you are thinking that same thing.
Oh gosh, now two competing questions. Okay, I'll ask one. One is that, so I'm breaking form and going back to Priestdaddy. That book, when I read it when did that come out? I read it at the time.
2017.
2017. Yeah. I read it in 2017, and then I read it again last week, and I just saw, in 2017, some of it felt kind of like frivolous, like, it's for comedic effect.
Yeah,
And then reading it last week, where there's a line about your father listening to Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter, but not Fox News because it was too liberal.
Yeah.
At the time, in 2016,
talk about a man who has a YouTube life. I don't even want to know what he gets up to on there, right? Yeah.
And then I guess to skip to the novel that's going to come out now, I'm guessing that you wrote that mostly during 2020 to 2024. So like you wrote it during Biden time, and then now it's going to come out during, like, both novels have. And so, okay, my complicated question about this is, I think there's sort of obvious answers to like what it is a novel can do that other things can't do, but I wonder whether it feels frustrating to be on the timeline of like book publishing. That like that one of the nice things about a tweet or even an LRB piece is, you know, which maybe will take a couple of weeks or a month or a couple of months, is that it's out. Whereas this is, you know, I mean, I started writing, my book will come out next year, and I started writing it in 2014, you know, which, I mean, maybe says much about me, but
no.
It's long.
I take about 4 years.
Okay, I take 12.
And you're probably writing better books. I genuinely, like, 12-year book is better than a 4-year book. But yes, although with mine, as you say, there's like these weirdly or eerily predictive things about them. And another thing that we were doing when we were adapting it for television was that, which I'm not even going to say that. So we were trying to, I'll say it in a minute. I'm going to say it. We were sort of trying to represent each individual in the house as being at the end of a different tunnel of information, right? So you have like the Twitch streamer in the Twitch streamer in the basement that you never see, and that you had the mom on Facebook at night, and I'm tweeting, and you know the Priestdaddy is doing whatever, and it was like we were siloed, and we didn't know it even at that point, even early on, and it just felt very strange, and it doesn't feel good now to look around and be like, oh, we were on the cutting edge of these things. I thought that my family was so anomalous. I thought that, you know, my older sister taking her daughters to Latin Mass wearing like the lace veils and stuff, I thought that was just weird, and instead it was the way that things were going. That doesn't feel good. But you know, it is true. And it's so sometimes you look back and you're like, well, maybe I did a useful thing consolidating some of this information. Yeah. What I was going to say that I wasn't going to say is that it was acquired by a production company who had also acquired a certain book known as Hillbillyology, which should have been a tip-off for me. You started to get production notes that were more like, can it be less Catholic? Can we be like nicer about this? Can we do this? Like, can we, I think reach across the aisle was even used. So at that point I was like, well, I don't want it to be made. I don't want it to be like used in that way, right? That's like a real Archie Bunker situation where it's like, he's the star of the show. He's the hero. When we were writing it, I was like, why is he still getting all the good lines, right? It's a problem. It's a problem.
So I want to ask a question that I've thought about a lot about this novel, which is that when it's written about by critics, they say the novel is in 2 parts, which it is. Like structurally, there's a part 1 and a part 2. And then they say the first part is in fragments, and it is like an endless scroll, and it's like you're being online, and then and it's about the internet, and then the second part is about real life, And no doubt there's a tonal shift in the book. But formally, it doesn't change.
It doesn't change. You're absolutely right.
And everyone says that the first part is it's mimetic. It's an endless scroll. It's like you're being on the internet.
Yeah.
But the second part of the book, which is about real life, is formally identical.
I know. You're right.
So I guess, so the question I want to ask is not the part about the first part, which is about the fragment, but what is the use for you formally of the fragment in the second half of the book? Like why, instead of going into sort of long paragraphs and chapters, and why do you maintain the fragment form when you're writing about this very serious, like, I mean, deeply moving, harrowing story? Why do you keep the form?
But I think you're right. She's still experiencing it in the same way, right? So she's writing about it in the same way. In my own life, I had been writing about the internet for a couple years, and in this fragmentary style that would suit writing about the internet. And when this happened to my sister, I just kept writing in that vein. But you're right, it is formally identical and it moves on. I think they get maybe a little bit longer and more concentrated and they push more. But the difference is that there are other people in the room. And in the first half of the book, no one else is in the room. Sometimes the husband passes through. No one else is in the room. Everyone is concentrated, in this place through the portal. They're there. So all of a sudden you have these concrete things. And so like the part where she's scrolling through Jason Momoa pics, where like what if this like child dies while I'm looking at fucking like Jason Momoa pics? Yeah. Like the internet is still a part of our lives. Our phones are still a part of our lives. Like we were playing Enya stuck on a single song, in like her death room, essentially. So I don't know if we've figured out a way lyrically to integrate it totally, because we do still feel embarrassed about it, about this technology and about like its hold on us, I think. But you're right, and it's very smart. I think the beginning, too, they're experiencing as stagnant, right, in its movement, and then the end is pushing out and through, something like that.
I mean, I think for me, that book is like, everyone is so determined to make the first part like online and the second part real life. Yeah. And what you do is show like the real life is online, like the online is real life.
Yeah.
Like
I yelled at the Archbishop of Canterbury about that. As you do. He was at the Booker party, and he was a very big supporter of the book, and I think that he had written about it contrastingly, and I was like, no, we are still using this. We are still adapting this technology to our needs in like a stone hammer type way, right? Yeah. Like to our blunt purposes.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on to the criticism, which if it was really up to me...
a big drink of polo water.
It was really up to me. So the first time I ever read you was in the London Review of Books, and it was your review of John Updike, which just blew my brain open. I just thought, like, I can't believe criticism can be this good. Like, I really just thought, like, this is unreal how good it is. So we were in for a surprise for Tricia and a treat for all of us. I haven't told her what I'm going to ask her to read, but there it is. And I would like you to read from the Updike piece. So turn it over.
I told her to surprise me.
Okay. So this is the beginning, and then I'd like you to read.
Okay, so all of it?
If you don't mind.
I don't mind. I was hired as an assassin. You don't bring in a 37-year-old woman to review John Updike in the year of our Lord 2019 unless you're hoping to see blood on the ceiling. Absolutely not, I said when first approached, because I knew I would try to read everything and fail and spend days trying to write an adequate description of his nostrils, and all I would be left with after months of standing tiptoe on the balance beam of objectivity and fair assessment would be a letter to the editor from some guy named Norbert accusing me of cutting off a great man's dong in print. But then the editors cornered me drunk at a party, and here we are. One woman, informed of my project, visibly retched over her quail. No, listen, I told her, there is something there. People write well about him. And I saw the red line of her estimation plunge like the Dow Jones. Didn't he write that thing, someone else said, about how women don't know how to piss because their insides are too complicated? Yes. In multiple books. It is at best puzzling and at worst an indictment of both Pennsylvania public schools and Harvard. I didn't remember that.
I did.
Please tell me you're writing something about Updike's 9/11 book, another said. Can't do that. I responded, because I'm pretty sure I would die while reading it, and that would be another victim for 9/11. Taste and tact had departed hand in hand. I had been reading too much John Updike. Oh, John Hoyer Updike.
Yeah,
I had that
there
whole
you
thing
go.
in.
Yeah.
In a 1997 review for the New York Observer, the recently king David Foster Wallace diagnosed how far Updike had fallen in the esteem of a younger generation. Penis with a thesaurus is the phrase that lives on. Though it is not the leveling blow it first appears, one feels oddly proud, after all, of a penis that has learned to read. Today he has fallen even further, still in the pantheon, but marked by an embarrassed asterisk. Died of pussy hounding. No one can seem to agree on his surviving merits. He wrote like an angel, the consensus goes, except when he was writing like a malfunctioning sex robot, attempting to administer cunnilingus to his typewriter. Offensive criticism of him is often reductive, while defensive criticism has a strong flavor of people are being mean to my dad. There's so much of him spread over so much time that perhaps everyone has read a different John Updike. The project began to feel like a flamboyant completist stunt, like one of those BuzzFeed articles where someone ranks every episode of the original Care Bears cartoons. This is not the way his work is ideally read. That would be over the course of a lifetime, accompanied by countless cups of coffee, by a man exactly his own age, and with the same long clowning lines and flared nostrils of a Quentin Blake drawing. I did get it. Smiles and cigarillos in a well-defended study and a thatch of white hair. New Updike, he might think, with a little uptick of a tricky heart. As he came across a trifling piece in the New Yorker, a meteor story in Playboy, a new novel every few years, and all backgrounded by the same infusions of radio and television and newsprint, the same social glosses in life and time. I am not such a man. When he is in flight, you are glad to be alive. When he comes down wrong, which is often, you feel the sickening turn of an ankle, a real nausea. All the flaws that will become fatal later are present at the beginning. He has a 3-panel cartoonist sense of plot. The dialogue is a weakness. In terms of pitch, it's a half-step sharp, too nervily and jumpily tuned to the tics and italics and slang of the era. And yes, there are his women. Janice is a grotesquerie with a watery drink in one hand and a face full of television static. Her emotional needs are presented as a gaping, hungry, and above all unseemly hole, surrounded by well-described hair. He paints and paints them, but the proportions are wrong. He is like a god who spends 4 hours on the shading on Eve's upper lip, forgets to give her a clitoris, and then decides to rest on a Tuesday. In the scene where Janice drunkenly drowns the baby, it wasn't the character I felt pity for, but Updike, fumbling so clumsily to get inside her that in the end, it's his hands that get slippery. Drop the baby. You read those things later and you're like, what is wrong with you? What is the matter with you? What is your deal? But the way I do it, I mean, I just take these notes as I go, and they go into the piece. So any of those real, ready, white-hot things you feel in the moment, they go in. I don't know if that's the best way to do things, or, you know.
But it is.
But maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't know.
Okay, so I enumerated the reasons why you're one of my favorite literary critics, and I'm going to go through them.
Okay.
Okay, so one thing that I feel has become like more and more rare is that you're not afraid to do two things. One is say if something is good or bad or a failure, and two, say like whether you liked it or didn't like it, or, and then even more impressively, like if you don't know.
Yeah.
And I wonder, and actually it struck me when you were reading the paragraph from Priestdaddy about your father, that like you inherit, right, that, what do you that he's like so black and white in his sermons, that there's a part of that in you. I wonder, okay, actually I'm just gonna ask a big question. What do you think criticism is for?
I think there really is nothing like it. I only ever did it because they asked me to, right? And I continue to only do it because they asked me to. I don't bring them things and say, I want to write about this. They say, do you want to write about this? And I'm like, no. And then I come back later and I'm like, well, maybe I see a way. And you're, what?
Did he ask you to write the X-Files?
No, that was me. That was me. However, They said Jean, so she's one of the editors there, and she does, like copy edits and stuff, and she's got a real eye for the line. They were like, that was one of 2 pieces she was excited about that year. And the other was a book about alien abductions. So we were like, maybe Jean is just really into alien stuff, right? So for me, I do it because it is some sort of like celestial homework. And I do feel like you are working through someone's mind. I think it's worthwhile to spend your life reading and writing. And I think it's worthwhile studying the way other people did those things. I mean, you're working your way into someone's body. I write about their bodies a lot. That's probably weird. I'm a woman, so I get away with it. But I really love to write about their bodies because they stare at us. I mean, I'm some little bitch on the back of this book looking at you, and you like rest it next to you, you're like, oh, that's tiresome. And I'm staring at you from the cover. These are real people. They lived and they wrote in history. And when you read in that way, you're entering history with them. You're entering those times, like how they thought, and you're entering their talent. If you feel your own talent to be limited, I don't, but I'm insane. That is one way that you can get above the ceiling of that. Like, you take on their abilities for a time. It's really this transmutation. It's amazing. Do you feel it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
you
that's
go
so
above your
beautiful.
own.
Yeah.
You go above your own height.
I mean, but I think this. So now we've skipped 2 and 3, and we're getting to the 4th thing that I like. Why I think you're so good at it, which is that what is always sort of like absolutely clear in your criticism is that you think that reading offers a kind of higher pleasure. That like there's a point of literature. That it's not something you do to learn more or get smarter. That there's something really like Catholic about it.
Oh, it is. It is very.
It's really spiritual.
Yeah.
It's actually really spiritual. And I think that, if I may, I don't know if I may. Maybe this is a bit we can censor out when we put the
we'll
video
see.
up on YouTube. That's actually what's kind of been lost at a place like this one. That what happens sometimes to people who learn how to read books in a room like this, like I was in a class this morning, and is that it's for saying that you've read a book to like know the contents of like what's in the book, and you just never have that with your writing. Like you're not trying to do that. You're like trying to get something for your soul.
For myself. I am storing up treasure in heaven. It's literally what I'm doing. It is possible that when you teach people to read in that way, some of that childish pleasure, I think, can be lost. And obviously I'm lacking in other things because I lacked that education. And I do mourn that. I would love to have been in this room as a young person, hearing my wisdom, like being sprayed at me, from the fire hose.
That's exactly what it's like.
But it is, I think that if there's any value in my criticism, it is because I have sort of determined to stand outside and play. Yeah. And I think if there is a person who can sort of stay and say, I'm going to be free and I'm going to be like a little piggy rolling around in shit because this is what feels good to me, right? It's literally like David Lynch talking about squeezing mud with his friends. And he's like, oh, what's better than squeezing mud with your friend? There's nothing better than squeezing mud with your friend. And like, that's how it feels. It does feel, I feel it in my body. I feel it in my eyes. I mean, the words jump out and I don't know what the main character's name is. Right?
But it's as though you do, when you're a critic, you do reading, like you do all of it, right? It's not just like, oh, let me tell you what the words mean. It's also, what does it feel like? I mean, the Updike, thing I love about the Updike piece is that there's nothing kind of like what we would call new critical about it. It's that you are, he is like a white man writing at a certain time. You are not that. Like, what does it feel like to read writing that wasn't really meant for you? And that's how we all read. Like, we're always read. That's how we all read. And sometimes when you read a piece of criticism, it's as though those things don't come into play.
That's good. I think that's interesting. If you present an idiosyncratic reading, you allow other people their own idiosyncratic readings. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, so there was this, I wasn't planning to say this, but when I read the Updike, there was somebody I was at graduate school with who I was once like in a room and everyone was sort of being polite and asking what people worked on. Like, what do you work on? And so I asked him, oh, what do you work on? And he said, are you familiar with the works of Thomas Pynchon? And I was like, yeah. But that's what, like, the update piece for me is
Yeah.
like, oh, it's like it's understanding like what books are for, like who they're meant for, who else can read them, what that experience
And
is
that's
like.
nothing to do with Thomas Pynchon. It's like
Right.
not even really to do with that guy, you know, it's like signifying something else,
Right.
right? And it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with his private reading either, right? Or your own private reading of Thomas Pynchon,
Tom-
your
right.
favorite author.
My
Thomas
right, exactly. Like that's the only person I read.
I
Thomas
know,
Pynchon. Yeah. Okay, I think we should open it up to questions right on the dot of
Yeah, let's do it.
6:55.
Yeah.
I will be the person who points to the person. So will you raise your hand?
We're
and
fetching around with a
Mary,
microphone. Yes.
Yeah. We have a question, one down here. But can you raise your hands if you have one and I can see you? We have one down here. Okay.
Hi. Thanks for coming in. I'm most of the way through. No one is talking
Oh,
about this.
perfect. Okay.
And you've made a few comments just over the course of the last however long it's been about how the sort of literary style of the internet that you capture in much of this book seems to be changing, or seems like that style seems to have disappeared. Drill has stopped tweeting, which felt like a moment.
That was a moment, yeah.
And so everything that account stood for seems to. I mean, I'm also just less online than I was 4 years ago.
All
but
of us, I think,
it
yeah.
kind of. I think we all are. Yeah, like you talked about how back in 2016 you felt this need to be tuned in, and now you're not needing to be so tuned in. And I think that seems to be pretty common.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more from you about both the like real world situation, but especially how you feel the literary style of the internet has changed in the last 4 years or so.
So I mention it at the very end of the new novel, where I say that there's this new grammar that is almost like falling down spiral. It's like clause stacked on clause stacked on clause, but there are actually no like offsetting commas or anything like that. And it seems to be an attempt to like lead with information. But I was like, no, this is genuinely changing. We also are hearing from teachers that students are having more trouble reading. I mean, I think everyone is having difficulty with attention and things like that too, but there are like technical problems with our reading. For me, the internet was not going to be a place I lived anymore when it was like infiltrated by the slop, right? Basically, the second I can't find something on Google, you know, or like I'm getting image results that are like not real people and that is AI stuff, I was like, that's not a place that I can really be anymore. So I got the Mahomes variant. In February, and I was sort of like, it was right after the inauguration, and I was like, so planned to be online, to really tune into all of that, and I just, whenever I would read any of the headlines, I was like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. And that's because in the world it didn't make sense, right? But then I was like, I'm not gonna try to do this. I don't know that I can do this again when it is so nonsensical, when so much of it is pronouncement and not actual action. It's very hard to know what to do. I strongly sympathize with anyone who is feeling that way at this time. I don't know, you can never say that a moment is over, that we were all there back at like CBGB's back in the day. But it was different. I do think that it was different. And now I think going forward I have to calibrate the way I take in information more, particularly on the internet, because like, what is it now? What is it now even? It feels so strange. It feels like an old mall or something. It's absolutely bizarre.
Down here. Sorry, Mary.
Thanks. Hi. I gave my mom my copy of Priestdaddy ages ago, and I made her bring it back to me so I could have it for today. And then when she heard I was coming to this, she really made sure that she read it. And so she called me and she said, I love it, but I want to hear first why you love it. And I said, I love how much I think she loves the world and how much that comes across in her writing. And my mom was like, is that true? And I was like, I don't know, I think so. And she thought that it was more about attention. And I guess I think that love and attention are the same thing in a writing sense, in a descriptive sense. But I was curious. I think all the time about your line from the Rome essay about how when you're writing an essay, all the world does is give you gifts and everything just falls into place. But maybe that's attention. And so I was wondering how you think about the difference between
Well,
those
I think that we can
concepts.
apply the adjective that we do so often to attention, which is that we lavish it, right? Like it feels so focused, it feels concentrated, like it comes to a point, but it's also like butter, it's like gold. it's flowing over something. Yeah, I think to say that I love the world, I think that's correct, and I think it's because I was one of those very cloistered people who had very little experience of the world. Not to be like I was a Dickinson or a Bronte or that type, but I was kind of that type, except I have a huge mouth, and I cuss all the time, and I'm not like those ladies at all. But, you know, I didn't get out into the world the way that people did. So my experiences of it, my encounters with it were always, they felt rare or cherished, or I might not have something like this again, like walking around Harvard Square. I never had anything like that. So then it becomes a very, very rare experience, and you notice all aspects of it, right? And if you notice all aspects, you set them down. That's how it works for me. But I think, not to be weird, but I think it's both, you're both right. Yeah, I think it's this.
Hi. I'm just thinking, I think at least that the novel is a form that requires a lot of attention. And I'm curious as to what you think is next for the novel in a moment where our attention spans are becoming so depleted, especially with sort of parts of the internet like micro content. I've thought a lot about like whether the form of the vignette is something that's going to become more useful, whether or not the play where you just have dialogue and not nearly as much sort of what I really love about literature, which could be considered sort of the fat that's around the dialogue. But, you know, I really don't know.
But you know what? You know, people also react when they're saturated with those microforms and those fragments. Like people do, they dive into long novels. Like this still happens, right? And they write long novels in that moment. If you look at the sort of novels that people were writing kind of, you know, during World War II, like even something like The Corner That Held Them, that great Sylvia Townsend Warner novel, something like that, you're going back into the past to apply something to the present. And I don't think it is linear. I don't think that, you know, because we write this way online, that this is the appetite. I mean, I think that the novel creates appetites. I have also, for some reason, started a historical fantasy novel. You know, like, I'm like, what can I do to not be in this time? So, what?
Tell us more about the historical.
I can't yet, but I'll tell you. I'll tell you later. Yeah, but it's an urban fantasy about the workings of art in the world, like the things that I'm interested in. How do I talk about the historical figures I want to talk about? How do I talk about the things I'm interested in? I don't think we should try to find a prescription. I don't even think we should necessarily try to dissect, right? Or out of anxiety think, this is what I should do because this is where things are trending. I do think you have to go into it like you feel you like the fat. I mean, I think that you stick with the fat. I give you permission to stick with the fat. Like you don't have to steer that away. Like this is what like the wide range of human talents are for, right? People who need solace, people who need to flee from that fragmentation, go to people like you for that sort of thing.
Okay, I'm going to ask a quick one, but then let's go to the person in the blue mask there. So I've just always wanted to ask you this, I guess. You just threw out another literary reference, and you've done that like 4 or 5 times already this evening. And your criticism is really full of it, right? It's like there's Eliot, and then there's so much Tolstoy. And so I guess I wanted to ask, what was reading like for you as a young person, as an adult? Like you didn't have a structured kind of 4-year education,
right?
But you know everything.
People think this. This is not true. Everything's in the piece, right? So this is like we have at our disposal huge libraries, right? Human libraries, and you can open a book from any shelf and you can put down a detail that you did not know, and it's in the piece, and it seems like your knowledge, and it's not necessarily. It's the world's knowledge. This is how it works. It seems like I know a bunch of things I don't freaking know, right?
Yeah, I don't believe you.
No, it is a little bit true. But I think being able to read on my own, sort of create my own syllabus and go down my own rabbit holes, if I'm reading Tolstoy, like I can choose the translation I want. It's not dictated by a teacher. I can read all, the ancillary material that I'm interested in. I don't have to read the Bible biographies, right? I can just be in the text. I can just be in the text.
But you can just be in the text, but you're still reading the text. Like the Levin stuff, like that, again, it's like with the uptake stuff, it's like your reading of Levin, it's like, oh, it's so refreshing. It's like not someone who's read like 12 articles about
Right.
Warren,
So I try,
you know,
and I
like,
do like,
of Anna Karenina. Yeah.
Right. I will say I grew up reading a lot of literary criticism. But I didn't read a lot of biographical stuff, and I didn't have anxiety about interpretation, really, right? And I wasn't experiencing books as a movie. I wasn't experiencing them as a series of happenings. I was experiencing them as like production of a mind. And I was trying to project myself into that mind, into that capability. From a very, very young age, I was trying to do that. And I don't think I read normally. I think that it's like a little bit abnormal. But I was free. I mean, I didn't get the degrees or anything like that, but I had freedom to read in the way that I wanted. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. So another binary for you, which is, I loved the love and attention question, and also the online real world binary, which is not one. And to me, it seems that another one in your work is the humor grief binary. So I just wondered if you could say a bit about how humor is, so often framed as a defense against grief, and it seems to me in your work that it's about getting right into it.
Yeah.
And whether that's changed over your life, whether it's changed through being chronically online.
So no, I think that it was always like that in our lives. Something really, really funny would happen, and then something really, really awful would happen. Or you would be having some hilarious family dinner, and you would be like, basically crying from some joke that someone told, and my dad like gets up because someone has like jumped in front of a train and he's got to go. So those things were always just bedfellows for us, and you experience them in the same rooms of the house. So that was never a conscious decision that I had to try to do that. It was always just, and then next this happened. And no one is talking about this, the part where they're at the funeral home and the brother introduces himself as the baby's husband by mistake. That was my real brother, and he talks in a funny way. He's like, I'm Paul, and I was Lena's husband. And we cried, like we just cried. It was like such a perfect thing to happen in that moment, because it's like the sort of mistake that he makes. It was characteristic of him. It was like the tension in the room was unbearable. There's this little, funeral director named Paul who's trying to be so tender and capacious and sympathetic to us, and we're just this fucked up family, right? And you bring that into the room with you, and you bring your history and the way you talk to each other and your dynamics, like grief and humor, like that's the human dynamic. That's a very good question.
Charlie.
Sorry. Charlie.
No, I didn't
All right,
call
let's
anyone
give,
else by
let's
name.
give Charlie a
so,
question.
All right, Charlie has the mic.
I once read that you composed many of your writings in a Proustian posture of absolute horizontal repose.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, do you still do this? Has this changed with COVID, with your literary reckoning, with your father who also would lie around but could spring into action?
Yeah.
Does that have something to do with the general workings of creativity? I was very interested in this fact about you.
I wish there were a couch here because I would do all the poses.
Right. So Charlie, it should be said, is an expert in idleness, like not just in his...
expert in idleness.
Yeah.
All right, I got
not
you,
in
Charlie.
his personal life, but in his professional one.
Yeah. So you're so right. It actually has changed a little bit with chronic illness. So I have like chronic, very weird migraines now, but they'll make my neck almost insanely rigid. So I have to like sit in a certain way that doesn't aggravate that. But yeah, it was always you were propped up in bed and your knees. You had your notebook on the knees, and then you had the book in front of the notebook, and the pen was right in that little spine, and that was just perfect, right? And then there would be a cat next to you or something like that. I don't think. I mean, like, how else would you read? Would you be like this? That's horrible. No, I'm like collapsing. It's like ridiculous. So now what I do, we have one couch that's like this, and then I want two couches, yes, so that I can just wheel it in, because I will do these poses. I literally will.
Well, can we just take a poll? Who reads sitting up? Okay.
Woo, freaks.
Yeah. Who reads only lying down? Wow.
So, you guys, we have to investigate this further. We have to like look at people's disciplines, and oh no, there is a couch. Oh, hell, yes!
Is that you? Is that your mic? Yeah, I think.
it. Okay.
But where did it go? It's there. Go on then. Yeah.
I'm gonna clip it on. Okay, is it like this?
I will continue to sit.
Okay.
Now
I'm wearing a
not
skirt.
going to lie down.
I'm wearing a skirt, but what happens in this room stays in this room.
Do you want a book? Here's a book.
So my dad is, I'm just gonna put my book here. He's like this. And he's got like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie on there. And he'll sometimes fart on you, like from this position. He would want you to sit with him. Here.
Wait, sorry, I've lost. Who's the he here?
His dad.
Okay.
My father.
Okay.
This is a Priestdaddy. So he's like this. Oh, ow. And he's like, sit next to me, and then he'll just like fart on you, and he's also just wearing underwear in this circumstance, right? So for me, I hope you enjoyed that. It's a little bit different. I'm like this. Okay, so I'm here, and there's another couch with an armchair right here, and I put my legs up there, and I like do this, and then the cat comes and sits right here. I love this couch.
I would like to say, like, I tried to make this, it was like Dickens and Form and Tolstoy.
No.
So this
really
is the
like,
vibe.
It's an invalidism thing. That was super hard to say. You know, Proust is one of those guys where it's like, he actually had stuff wrong with him, but we act like he didn't. You know, I'm very interested in this, like, as you read some of these people and we're like, well, Charles Darwin's kept telling us that his stomach hurt. And I was like, maybe it actually hurt. He was probably like gluten intolerant or something. He had asthma. It's so strange how for some people we like accept their physical infirmities, and other people were like, well, Kafka was always complaining because he was dying of TB in the ancient ages. Like, it's so weird, right though? Thank you. I know, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm working on Plath right now, and that's a thing where we actually kind of take her stuff seriously because it's like sinusitis and PMDD, and we're like, sinusitis is too boring to lie about, right? You can't, like, that's not something psychosomatic that you can make up. So we actually take that stuff seriously. Yeah. So I'm looking into it. I'll report back.
Okay, I think we have like 2 more questions. Go. Hand up here.
All right, give me a sec.
Oh, that's tough. Sorry, Mare.
Oh yeah, she's sprinting. Go, girl.
Actually, does somebody else want to put up their hand for the final question? Great.
Oh, they're just gonna do it.
Thank you. So humor is such a vulnerable thing, right? Whether it's putting something out into the ether and seeing if you're going to elicit the response that you're intending your audience to get, but also the vulnerability in humor of allowing the tackling of vulnerable topics and creating distance so that you can actually look at it. So my question for you is, how do you navigate that vulnerability, but especially with the context of your family as the subjects, and within that as well, I guess, how does your family respond to your work, whether they consume it themselves or knowing that they are part of the subject matter? Yeah.
My family is they're like angels about it, you know? My mom, she didn't read it. We don't know if my mom can read. She listened to the audio. She's like, I think she's very dyslexic, you guys. Like, and maybe that's what's, you know, a little bit going on here. So she finally listened to the audiobook because I read it. And she said, that's exactly how it was. That's how it happened. And I was like, well, it wasn't totally how it happened. Like, but they're just angels. And my brothers and sisters, they're like so proud of me. And, you know, my sister, like, I asked her about it when I was, you know, writing about her child, her daughter, her ill daughter, you know, who was the light of her life. And she was like, I would never tell you what you could write about. And she was like, I don't have memories of those things. Because when people go through that sort of grief, a lot of times they just erase it. They don't try to remember. And she's like, it exists, you know, because someone wrote it down. So they're very, very good about those things. I think that we formed a sort of like sibling sense of humor in reaction to my dad's really explosive temper, right? So we would laugh at him because he would just blow up and it'd be over something really stupid and be like in his underwear and he'd be chasing my brother Paul, Lena's husband, up into the top bunk to like wail on him, you know, but my brother would just laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. And there was something like so amazing and human and wonderful about that, like in the face of this like violence that someone is trying to commit, that you're just like laughing and laughing, and it was like real joy too, like that he couldn't be hurt, you know, that he wasn't going to get him. And so I think that had something to do with it. It wasn't a mean-spirited thing, and I hope, even in the criticism, like I hope it's not mean-spirited. It's like real reactions to these things. And I think that it was something we formed together, and maybe that's why they're so supportive and generous about it now. And my mom was a little bit part of that too. You know, she was.
I think Deidre has the last question.
That's such a perfect place to end that I probably should not even ask my question. I've taught in this class several times.
Yeah.
In this classroom, and it has never been filled with laughter like this. So, you know, thank you for making us look bad.
Maybe you're just not doing it right.
Obviously. Because things like humor attached to your work are important to your work, and things about the internet and Twitter, and that the alacrity of that form is connected to what you do. The other part of it, the criticism, what Professor Menon has praised so much, can seem like a little bit of almost like a contradictory move. It's not at all.
Yeah.
It's this other aspect of the criticism I want you to talk about, which is these pieces are long.
They're long as hell, I know.
And they're deep. I mean, this is an artifact of asking the question late. Many of these things have been answered already. That feeling that you've read everything and all that, but that's not what I want to ask about. It's about the concentration.
Yeah.
They actually take quite a long time to write. So if you could talk about how long it takes to write the pieces, but also your sense of being a little bit countercultural in spending so long doing a deep dive. Many people read the Updike, and I don't know how many people read the Mary McCarthy. Did you write one about her? No.
Which one?
Mary McCarthy?
No, but they keep asking me to. Yeah,
Okay.
So one day.
Which one am I thinking about?
Carson McCullers or
You wrote about
Edna
Carson
O'Brien,
McCullers.
yeah.
I don't think that one got read as much as.
Oh, yeah, no.
Updike.
And
Do you know
that
what
was
I
early
mean?
on,
But
too.
it took a long time. Yeah.
It
You really had to
absolutely
read
did.
the stuff. So can you talk about your sort of centering
Yeah.
that makes you're this very funny person. You're kind of like a master of the short forms.
Short form.
And then you decide, see you guys in 3 months.
Yeah.
I'm going in.
Yeah, I'm going in. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I could ask you the same question. You were also a master of the short form yourself, and then
A
you,
mistress at
you-
best.
You go long. But I do maybe it is a sort of protest or reaction, but also I think it is because it's something they're asking me to do. And if someone is asking me to do something, I'm going to be conscientious, I think. It's not even to the publication, but to the writer. And that, for me, means really, really deeply thinking about it. And it was always true of me that, like, given a day, I would spend probably 8 hours of it reading. And now, you know, the chronic illness makes that more difficult. And part of what this book is about finding a way back to reading and writing when those things break. Like, who are you as a person? You know, it's not that I have this strong identity of myself as, like, a writer and a reader, but when it's gone, when you don't have that, you almost think, what do I do with my days? Like, what am I here for? What is my life? And you're just trying to get back to that childhood oasis where you can go long. So in that sense, it's like a parallel life where you're happy, right? And so you're not thinking about whether you're correct or incorrect, because that's, again, the least interesting thing probably about criticism, whether you're right or wrong. It's just that sustained, like, entering into a person. Maybe it's like a kind of method act. Maybe it's method criticism. Maybe it is, right? You're just trying to go, because you would want the same thing for yourself. I mean, that you were a human being that was alive, and these were your concerns. And if you're John Updike, you're like writing about like jacking off into the, you know, the omelet or the scrambled eggs, and someone comes along in 50 years and is like, what the hell are you talking about, man? But you have to think about that. You have to think about this person and the context and like the time in which he lived, and it's exhilarating to do that, right? I really do understand, like, I'm not a historical fiction writer in that way, but I get that. I get going into a person in that way and really trying to like fill them to the fingertips.
It is also, you know, I was brought up by atheist parents, but when I read you, I just like cannot help to think in religious terms, and I feel like, in the way that we would say without thinking that your dad has a vocation, you have one too. Like, the vocation is it's this, and like the criticism, like that's like.
Yeah. And I feel that framework. I still use those terms.
Yeah.
I probably talked about it that way. I was just like not ever going to do anything else.
Yeah.
So then, if it's taken from you, right, or if it recedes, or if you can't grasp it, if you don't know what you think, like it becomes a really interesting question. Like, who are you? What happens next? And scene.